All right, what we got now is chapter, I don't know what it was, chapter on something, but in chapter 6, there you go. In this chapter, we're going to discuss the material for the third short paper, which is going to be due this coming Sunday. Of course, what does that mean when you watch this video, right? But anyway, in this third paper, I want you to briefly, very briefly, describe the studies of Ash, Sharif, and Milgram. In fact, put them in a different order, Sharif, Ash, and Milgram, because that's the order that they occurred. And we want to talk that Sharif and Ash, very small details. I want you to talk about how they're similar. We're going to talk about conformity and obedience. And they're similar in a lot of ways. But it turns out, and when we get to them, I want you to pay attention because Sharif's study and Ash's, no. Sharif's a little funkier too, isn't it? Ash's study is really conformity. Milgram's study is flat-out obedience. And I want you to think about these things because there's two different aspects to this. There's A, what you externally do, what is your physical external behavior, and there is B, what you truly inside believe, okay? And what you do and what you believe may not match each other. And I want you to pay attention to that, to the distinction between those two things when you look at Sharif, Ash, and Milgram's studies, because clearly external behavior and internal belief systems sometimes are in mismatch with each other. What makes them unique? There you go. How can you relate the findings from these to your own life? Different cases where you conformed, different cases. Hey, I can just tell you this. I still remember in 1984, Michael Jackson's Thriller album came out. It's a good album. You gotta love that album. And so the zipper jackets were in style, man. Everybody wanted a zipper jacket. I knew that they were stupid, but I conformed to everybody else because I wanted to fit in. I did not believe that they were cool. I knew that they were stupid. I knew that they were idiotic, but I did it to get along and to fit in with the group. And so clearly we conform, and in other cases we are obedient. We do things we disagree with. But anyway, we'll come back to that. Perhaps they can help you, when you look at these studies, maybe they can help you to explain something from your past. Maybe they can even help you in future situations. All right. I'm going to go into the actual chapter because this is a cool chapter. This is classic social psychology. A lot of this stuff I actually first learned about in my Intro to Sociology class back in 1989. Oh, that tells you how old I am. Intro to Sociology class. It was an eye-opener, okay? This is actually very interesting. I guess all I can do is read this. During the Vietnam War, as during any war, many acts of brutality were committed by soldiers on both sides, and most people seem to realize this. Nevertheless, one particularly horrifying event appalled people around the world. On March 16, 1968, American soldiers killed hundreds of people living in a village called My Lai. No, I think it's My Lai. According to Paul Meadlow, a soldier who participated in the shootings, the leader of the operation, Lieutenant William Cawley, ordered his men to shoot everyone in the village. So here was when they were, what's his name? Meadlow. Meadlow was being interviewed by some 60, like Mike Wallace or something. He told this to all of you, or to you particularly. Well, I was facing him, but I have to read it from over here. But the other 3-4 guys heard it, and so Cawley, the guy in charge, stepped back about 10-15 feet and started shooting them. And he told me to start shooting, so I started shooting. I poured about 4 clips into the group. And you killed how many? Well, I fired them automatic, so you spray the area. You don't know. You can't know how many you killed because they were going fast. So I might have killed 10 or 15. Men, women, and children? Yes, men, women, and children. And babies? Yeah, babies. Now you're rounding up more? We're rounding up more. We had 7 or 8 people. And we're going to throw them in the hooch. I don't know. I guess that's jail or something. And we put them in the hooch, and then we dropped a hand grenade down there with them. And somebody holed up in the ravine and told us to bring them over to the ravine. They had about 70, 75 people all gathered up. So we threw ours in with them, and Lieutenant Cawley told me, he said, "Soldier, we got another job to do." So he walked over to the people, and then he started pushing them off and started shooting. And so we started pushing them off, and we started shooting. So all together, we just pushed them all off and just started using automatics on them. There you go, Mike Wallace. So the question is this. I mean, it was horrible, and yet this guy just, it just was life. Is this guy a sadistic psychopath that enjoys murdering defenseless people? Is he horrible? Or to take it back, I mean, in Nazi Germany in World War II, there was just horrible atrocities. Did it happen because German people are just evil, sadistic bastards? Is that what it is? Some people say yes. Some people can never forgive, okay? Well, we're going to talk about some of that stuff today. Because what would have happened if you were in this situation here in Vietnam? What would you have done? I want to think I would stand up and do the right thing, but would I? I don't know, because I'm not in that situation. And we're going to talk about how important that situation is. It can definitely override what we believe. Read it. Okay. So first off, what is conformity? A change of behavior or belief as a result of group pressure, whether whether it's real or imagined group pressure. Here in America, it tends to carry negative implications. To conform is to be a sheep. Sure, I follow the herd, not out of brainless obedience, mind you, but out of a deep and abiding respect for the concept of community. No, we're real individualists here in America. We talked about that in chapter 2 or 3 or something. We do not look well at conformity. Conformity can come in different flavors, though. Compliance, obedience, and acceptance. Okay? Compliance is conformity in which you act in some way, but you don't change your internal belief. We conform in order to gain a reward or avoid a punishment. That's it. But inside, we have not changed what we believe. Obedience is acting in accord with it. Right? Acceptance is conformity that involves both acting and changing our belief. Okay? Sometimes we do it and then we believe it. So here's the first study for the paper, Muzaffar Sharif. Muzaffar Sharif set up this situation where he put people into a dark room, and I believe there was three people in the room, and he puts a point of light out there. And it's just stationary point of light. But the autokinetic phenomenon is really a neat, it's perception class, but this phenomenon where if you're sitting in a dark room and there's a point of light, it's going to look like it moves. Okay, it just does. I don't know why. And so on the first day, they put these people in a room, and they sit there for a while, and then they ask all three of them, how far do you think the point of light moved? And the first person says, I think it moved 8 centimeters, inches. The second person says, I think it moved 2 inches. And the third person goes, well, I didn't really see it move. You bring them back on the second day, and you do the exact same scenario, and the first guy says, I think it moved 4 inches. And the second guy changes his slightly up, and look at this. And by the time on the fourth day, what we find is that their responses all came together. And this is very interesting. It reminds me of, it reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever heard this, but it turns out if you take a group of women, unrelated women, or related, I guess, and have them live together, very soon their menstrual cycles will all line up with each other. It just does. That's what we are. That's who we are. We come in, we just work with each other. And that's what a norm is all about, okay? They came to have a belief system together, okay? Very cool little, it's very simple, but very cool study. Well, very similar to this, we're social creatures. We're influenced by others. Turns out that yawning is a fixed action pattern that can be triggered. I love this. They showed this image here on the far left, and when they did, people yawned. Look at that. They did the same thing, but they didn't show the mouth. And the amount of yawning was slightly less, but it was still there. And when they showed just the mouth, there was very, very little yawning by the people watching. And so we find that it's a fixed action pattern. I know you're going to have to go back to your notes from a learning class or something, but a fixed action pattern is a biologically programmed set of behaviors which is triggered by some stimulus in the environment, whether it be, female monkeys that are triggered to do certain behaviors at the sight of a red baboon butt or whatever. I mean, but it's us too, okay? When we see something, it's like the raising of the eyebrows or something, it triggers us to yawn. We're just contagious that way. When they show smiles, people didn't yawn, all right? Didn't work. So we find that we are very social creatures. We follow the pack, okay? Say, for example, I'm at church. Imagine you're at church, and they're singing a song and praising God, and somebody goes and raises their hand. And a minute later, other people start raising their hand. Are these other people raising their hand because they truly want to praise Jesus? Or are they raising their hand because it's just what everybody else is doing? All right? It's just social contagion. We just do. We just follow everybody else. Okay? All right. So in our second study, this is Solomon Ash's study. You'll have to imagine this. This is a neat study. In this study, there is a line, a standard, and the people are told, we're going to show you these three comparisons, and your job is to tell us which line, A, B, or C, is the same length as the standard. Okay? So here's your standard, and the answer is C. Pretty straightforward. Now imagine that they would modify how long the standard is and modify, but it's the same task over and over and over. So now they bring people into this study, but now they're going to do it in a group. And so they bring in 7 people. And 6 of those people worked for Solomon Ash, and 1 did not. 1 was a participant. And so what they did was they put them in there, and the first person, up comes this one, and the first person that worked for Solomon Ash is C. The second person is C. And our participant is number 6. And so our participant says C. And then the second trial, and the third trial, and the fourth trial, everything is good. But all of a sudden, the 5th trial comes up. Boom. And the first person goes B. And our poor participant just like, what the hell are you talking? Look at this guy. He's like, what is he? What? And the second person goes B. And the third person goes B. And the fourth person goes B. And the 5th person says B. And now it's our poor participant's turn. Inside, he knows the answer is C. He knows it's C. But the 5 people before him just said B. What's he going to do? Okay? Now, it turns out there's different variations on this, and the answer to that is not very simple. However, if our participant is sitting by himself, he will get this right 99.8% of the time. He knows the right answer. But when he's sitting there and the 5 people in front of him said the answer is B, he has about a 30% chance of saying B as well, and about a 70% chance of saying the right answer. But he knows the right answer. He makes a mistake 30% of the time to fit in with the group. Different versions on this were done, and many different versions on this were done. And it turned out in some versions they did things like they modified how good the group was. In one version, say, the group that they were sitting with was a bunch of hoodlums in leather jackets, and then it gets to this guy's turn, and he doesn't really work with the group together if they're people he doesn't respect, or let's pretend it's the young Republicans and with the ties and whatever. And all of a sudden he complies more. Okay? He complies more if he respects the group. Ash did different versions where, the first 3 people get it wrong, but the 4th person says the right answer. And then the 5th one gets it wrong. Our guy, he'll get it right. Because there was one other person there to give him, this support so he didn't look so stupid. Okay? There were so many different versions. They've done this in America. In America, there's less conformity. But you do this in Japan, and a Japanese participant sitting there will almost always say the wrong answer to fit in with the group. Almost 100% of the time. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the third study, but we're going to talk about why this guy is doing it. All right?